Hey everybody, welcome to your horoscopes for the week. These are the horoscopes for the week ending November 5th. We're in November now, which is a little bit crazy. 2023 is almost over, and well, I'm not sad, to be honest with you. It's kind of been a difficult one. Uh, hopefully we can find some improvement. Pay no attention to the cat here. He thinks that he's the star, and that's okay. We'll let him think that. We're going to go ahead and get to it because we have a lot of craziness going on this week, and we're going to start with Aries, as we always do. We're going to end the week with the moon in Aries, actually, which isn't really a big deal. It's not really giving us too terribly much trouble anyways. That retrograde Jupiter is still on the cusp of Pisces and Aries, still retrograde and will continue to be retrograde this week. I do believe into December, as a matter of fact. So you guys are going to have a nice little break from Jupiter there for a minute, and then he'll come back. He'll go direct. He'll come back in. He'll spend some time, and then by April-ish next year, he'll be moved on, but he'll go retrograde again. So he will be back later on in the year. The good news is the moon is not really lining up with any planets at all, which is good. Focus is on how you think about things. And actually, that's very interesting. Perception is really very important, actually, in terms of how you see things. Pay no attention to the cat butt that just went by again. How you see things really does make a difference. When we're talking about people who are negative, we're talking about people who tend to see things as glass half empty rather than glass half full. And when the moon comes in towards the end of the week, you may find yourself actually dealing with a little bit of emotional thinking. In my experience with Rams, I'm not an Aries myself, but in my experience with Rams, they tend to avoid emotional thinking like the plague. And so, with that being said, um, every Aries that I've ever known has tried to keep themselves super duper duper busy so they don't have to think about things that could be a little bit emotional for them. Now, that's not a bad thing until you have pushed so much stuff on the back burner that you just can't deal with it anymore. And when you push things on the back burner, they don't go away. They just sit there and they fester, and then they come out later on in a way that's very disruptive to your life. We'll put it that way. I have a really good example of that. I am an emotional stuffer. I've been stuffing stuff for years and years and years now. It catches up with you eventually. And you just have one of those years where your oldest child graduates from high school and turns 18. You got your first kid turning 18. I got really sick that year. We had a lot of people pass in that year. It was a very emotional year. And the problem for me was that the emotions started to billow out at inconvenient times. So I'm a very personal, emotional person. I like to be by myself or with a trusted person. Very few people on that list, by the way, of trusted people. Not a big fan of it coming out in public or at inappropriate times. And unfortunately, that was one of those instances where it came out basically whenever it wanted, whether I was in public, whether there's people around. It didn't really matter. It just kept billowing out because it needed to come out. We also don't really think about the fact that being an emotional stuffer means that those emotions are being stuffed somewhere in there, and usually that is in the middle of your digestive area. So it also causes a lot of problems, physical problems, like digestive issues, issues with going to the bathroom, in some cases anxiety, can affect the heart over time. So there's just all of these little things that sort of take place. It's better to take the time by yourself to just let some of this stuff out. I'm a big fan of waiting till everybody's at work and then putting on a movie that I know is going to make me cry and just letting it kind of sort of pour out of me. That way it doesn't happen at an inconvenient time. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Luckily, it's only a day or two, and then you can move on from it. And we are going to move on to Taurus. We still have that retrograde Uranus in there. Uranus continues to be retrograde this week, continues to be in a square with Saturn, which is not retrograde anymore. But that has been the issue for a long time. That issue gets much bigger this week when the sun moves into Scorpio. The sun, Venus, and Mercury all move into Scorpio basically together, all three in conjunction with each other, which means they move into opposition with Uranus, and that square becomes a much bigger issue. It becomes a T-square. So let's break this down for you guys. We're looking at an opposition with Uranus and the sun, Venus, and Mercury. With focus on home and the sun, Venus, and Mercury focused on career, this is always one of those classic cases of having to feel like your time is being pulled in two different directions. When you add the square with Saturn to it, and Saturn's very much the tip of the point of this T-square here, Saturn's focus is right in the middle of past experience as well as self, and in terms of your own personal responsibilities to yourself. Now look to the past, and I'm not just talking to Taurus women here, but I think that Taurus women are definitely the ones that seem to fall victim of this more than men do. Not to say that men don't, but look to the past this week for some interesting tidbits on when you were in this situation and when you put all of your energy into both of these things. Your home responsibilities as well as your career responsibilities. And then I want you to ask yourself, what's missing there? Most of the time it's self-care. And the thing is that when we're really young, not calling anybody old, okay, but I'm 45 years old. When I was in my 20s, it was easy to do that. Yes, I kind of wore myself out from time to time, but you don't wear yourself out that often doing that kind of stuff. As you get older, on the other hand, it becomes more and more difficult to be able to keep up that sort of productivity without giving yourself a break. So this really is what this T-square is all about. It sort of adds that layer of challenge to where, yes, sometimes you have a lot going on with your kids and you have a lot going on with your job and your career, and there really isn't a whole lot of time for you time. The truth is, you gotta make you time as much as possible, and it doesn't take a lot. It takes, instead of rushing through a shower in the morning, take a 15-minute shower, get some meditation in while you're taking that shower. If you get the kids to bed kind of early, rather than trying to hurry up and get everything all cleaned up and everything perfect, take a few minutes out of that for yourself, just to kind of rest, to clear your mind. It'll help you focus on what you need to do tomorrow. And here's another thing that is really interesting, and something that we definitely need to bring up here in the horoscopes as well. I find that a lot of people will say that they don't have time for self-care, but the truth is that's not necessarily true. You have plenty of time. It's just human beings are really good at misusing time. And when you misuse time, then of course it eats up that time. So you don't have time, right? The truth of the matter is, it's very common for people to stay awake all night long thinking about all the things that they have to do tomorrow. And the truth of the matter is, you can sit down for 10 minutes, plan out your day, know that you've got everything done, and be able to take that time to either sleep. I know it's a wild thought there, to either sleep or to take some time to clear your mind and meditate before you go to bed. And that actually will promote better sleep to boot. So when you're talking about self-care, self-care is not laying on the couch and eating bonbons in your bathrobe. That's not what we're talking about here. Self-care is all about what kind of time and the value of that time you are putting into yourself. So you have a few minutes every single day. Actually, you have several instances of a few minutes every day. You got to make those few minutes count. And the more you make those few minutes count, the better you are at being able to tackle all the things that you have on your list. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we are going to move on to Gemini. Mars continues to be retrograde in Gemini, and it's going to be retrograde throughout the end of the year, to be honest with you. So that's not going to change anytime soon. Mars trine with Saturn is actually very helpful this week with focus on your day-to-day schedule. Now we're talking air signs and we're talking Geminis. A strict schedule is not necessarily Gemini friendly. It's not that no Gemini can handle a schedule. I have met a few, but as a rule, Geminis just kind of like to fly by the seat of their pants. They like an open schedule. And when you're talking about Mars influence over that in retrograde, it sort of takes the ambitious direction out of your schedule and kind of makes that the type of schedule that just willy-nilly has no purpose, if that makes sense. And while in some cases Geminis love that, they also loathe it in a way too. It's very strange, but don't ask an air sign to ever explain themselves as to why they are the way that they are, because we don't know either. So if we don't know, we sure as heck can't tell you. I'm not a Gemini, but I'm an Aquarius, and it's pretty much the same. This trine with Saturn is actually really interesting. Saturn's focus is right on the cusp, right in between the house of self and the house of the past. And this is actually showing you a very interesting tidbit of information when you think about it. Self-care is extremely important, and you can look to the past to see where you have been good at promoting self-care for yourself and where maybe you need a little bit of help in terms of promoting self-care for yourself. We're all there. We've all been there. The quality of self-care may not be quite what we need it to be, and that can always be an issue. So those planets are working together to sort of help you with that particular issue. We do have a square with Jupiter and Neptune, both planets also being in retrograde. Neptune's very much focused on the past, and Jupiter is right on the cusp of the past and how you think. Well, Geminis think in a way that is completely and totally different to the rest of us. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But when we're talking about Gemini thought processes, overthinking is really what we're coming up with here, or really what stands out here. And overthinking a situation is not necessarily helpful. In fact, it drives you absolutely batty crazy. So when you find yourself overthinking what you need to do in terms of your schedule, you want to take a step back. You want to take yourself out of the situation. You want to give yourself a break for just a minute. You want to clear your head. You want to refocus, because when you're overthinking, it's like you're trying to put too much into that schedule, and you're going to wind up getting yourself confused, or important things are not going to get done. And of course, we want to avoid that as much as possible. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're going to move on to Cancer. We have no planets influencing Cancer. We do, however, have Pallas Athene and the Lilith in a perfect conjunction with each other, both 23 degrees, which means they're basically in the same place. And that is what a conjunction is. When two entities, I'm not going to call them planets because technically the Lilith isn't really a planet, it's more of a mathematical point in the chart, but it does carry some weight. When two entities are in a conjunction like that, they're very much working very closely together. With focus on relationships this week, this adds a more interesting layer to what's going on. Let's talk about these entities though for a minute. Pallas Athene is an actual dwarf planet, so it does exist in our little universe. Pallas Athene is known as the warrior goddess. She is I always look at Pallas Athene as a mother, you know, or a wife. We are absolutely ready to lay down our lives and fight for those that we love. And when we're talking about the dark moon or the Lilith is very much a promoter of change, but it's a promoter of change in terms of literally running away from things that just don't resonate with us. Now, when we're talking about relationships, this is actually a prime opportunity to really take stock of the relationship and really take stock of the things that just aren't working in that relationship. And when you can identify the things that aren't working in the relationship, you stand a better chance to put yourself in a position to fight for change and promote change so that the relationship actually works better for you. Now, let me just elaborate on that here really quick, because I don't want a bunch of Cancers out there fighting with their, you know, within their relationships because they're not necessarily getting what they want. When I say fight, I don't mean put your boxing gloves on. I mean standing up for what you believe is right, even if that goes against what other people think is right. Everybody has the ability to look at or to try to get what they want out of a relationship. And it doesn't, we're not just talking love relationships, we're talking about relationships with family, we're talking about relationships with your friends, things like that. There's always those people that are like, this is just who I am and I'm not going to change. You might as well just get used to it. I don't agree with that necessarily. I think that everybody has the ability to change if they choose to do so. And when somebody says, this is how I am and I'm not going to change, well, obviously they're not making that choice, right? So it's not about whether they can or can't. They just are kind of refusing to. The truth of the matter is that when it comes to relationships, both parties need to evolve. And so we're looking at not necessarily fighting against these people and saying, I don't like this, I need you to change this. But we're also mirroring that back at ourselves. What am I doing to cause or possibly cause this bit of a problem that I am having within this relationship? I've always found also that it is very helpful to sit down with the person and to say, I would like to open up a discussion. I have certain things about this relationship that I would like to discuss, and I am inviting you to also discuss some relationship issues that you may be having with me. And then that way you can come up with a compromise. So for instance, I actually did this many years ago with my husband. He hated the fact that I nagged him. I didn't really think in my own head that I nagged a lot, but obviously in his view it seemed like I did. So I said, okay, I will make sure that I stop doing that, or I will be aware of when I'm doing that and I'm having a problem with, I can't remember even what it was. And so we each had something to work towards. And it makes it so much easier than just sitting down with somebody and saying, I hate the way that you're doing something. And then when they bring up something about you, you're like, I'm perfect. I don't know what you're talking about, right? This is where the fight always happens, and this is this is why the relationship always winds up not working out. So a compromise, I'm a big fan of telling people relationship is a business. You have to sit down at the conference room table and you have to hash things out. And so if you do this, you stand a better chance of being able to move forward in your relationship goals rather than continuing to fight over the same thing over and over again, making it feel like you're both sort of chasing each other's tails in a circle forever. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And I'm moving on to Leo, and not a whole lot going on in Leo this week, which is good, with planets in other fixed signs. Even the moon in Leo is going to be kind of a challenge, and it will be eventually, but not this week. So that's good. We have no planets or influences in Leo at all, and focus is on finances this week. This is actually very interesting, a very interesting focus for Leos. At least it's interesting to me because I have two clients in the financial business who are Leos. But I feel that this course is all about your personal finances and your personal goals in many ways. And it is really important actually to take the time to focus on those financial goals. Take it from me. I've never done that. Or I can say I haven't never done that, but I've only started to do that in the last couple of years because I didn't realize the importance of actually sitting down and creating financial goals. But the truth is you never get anywhere if you don't. So one of my wonderful Leo clients, by the way, pointed that out to me. Thank you, Jenny. Appreciate that. And sort of opened my eyes to a whole different way of living in terms of your finances. When it comes to your financial goals, it's important that you sit down with a professional, of course, and talk to somebody, especially if finances and money is not something that you're really good at. I mean, I'm great at making it. It's what I do with it afterwards that I don't really know what to do with, or I wind up making decisions that may not necessarily be in my best interests, because that's, of course, what happens when you don't create financial goals. So this week is really an important time to take the time to look into that. The other thing that comes up for me on this is I do feel that it is important to have money set aside for those emergency situations. Not to say that the emergency situations are coming up this week. That's always a possibility, but I feel it's more that's a little something that we don't necessarily think about. Putting away money for a rainy day. What happens when your car breaks down? What happens when your refrigerator breaks down? What happens when you have to replace the roof? It becomes this major expense that you have. And if you don't have the money or the credit cards to deal with it, it also becomes a major problem. So I feel that that is also a very important focus for you Leos this week, is to make sure that you have something like that set up so that you're not caught unaware. I can't tell you how many times I've been in this situation, and I have this running joke that my washer and dryer always break down when it's tax return time. And the good thing about that, of course, is that I have the money, because usually outside of tax return time, I really don't have the money. But at the same time, almost every time I get the money, something like that breaks down. And it's wonderful to have the money. But if I have something set aside to where that isn't an issue every time I get a chunk of money, it does make life easier. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're going to move on to Virgo. We technically are between focuses this week, which means there's not much that you are really focused on, but Ceres comes in and sort of points your focus to finances this week. Ceres is another one of those dwarf planets, not a major influence, doesn't really do a whole lot um of aspecting with other planets. I mean, it can. But usually these minor entities have a small focus, and it's a major focus if there's no major planets in there. It's a small focus if there is a major planet in there, which we don't have actually. But focus is on finances. Ceres focuses on finances. Ceres is who they call the Great Mother, as a matter of fact. I always look at Ceres in a very similar way to the sign of Cancer, because that is what the sign of Cancer represents: motherhood and nurturing and caretaking. And I feel like Ceres influence for you guys this week is really important because it gives you the opportunity to actually take a look at your finances in a completely different way. Most of the time, we are very logical about our finances. We have our bills that we have to pay. We have to put some money aside into savings accounts. We have to pay our taxes, blah, blah, blah. But really looking at finances as being nurturing for you, that's not something that most people look at. And the truth is that money is nurturing when you put it to the right use. So we're looking at setting aside money for self-care, whether that's making sure that you have money for health issues that come up, or that you are maybe shopping for health insurance, but it's also about setting aside money for things that you need to take care of you, or maybe that you need to take care of your family also, because Ceres is not so much about you, it is about nurturing others when you think about it. This could also mean looking at extra money as something that should go to charity to help nurture others also, or go into charities that are about education for children, different things like that. But really, it comes down to nurturing yourself and those people around you that are really important to you. I always look at it, when I was raising children, we always had just enough money to survive, basically. I mean, I had 3 boys, so just feeding them was expensive. Um, but I would have loved to have had the money to take them to Disneyland and to do fun things with them, because just taking care of your children and feeding them, obviously you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and that is a wonderful thing. But nurturing is really spending time. And I feel like sometimes, yes, you can spend time with them at home, but it is really important to set aside that little bit of money to go and do something fun with them, because it's the memories of you that they're going to remember long after you're gone, and not necessarily because you paid all the bills and kept a roof over your head or over their heads. I know that's important, but that's not what they're going to remember of you. They're going to remember all the fun things that you did with them, because that's what's really important in terms of raising a family and raising children. So it's a little bit of a different twist on not just how you're making your money, but what you're putting your money towards. And I think that that's something that we tend to forget, because it's not high on the priority list. Our bills are high on the priority list. Our home is high on the priority list. Food is ridiculously expensive, so is gas, and those are high on our priority list. But putting aside money for something that's fun, that might be nurturing to you, or a trip that is educational for you, we tend to talk ourselves out of spending that money a lot. And this week, I feel it's important that you don't do that. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're going to go ahead and move on to Libra. We are focused on long-term goals this week and nothing to influence our focus whatsoever. Nothing to sway us one direction or the other. For Libras, being that whole balance thing, that's a beautiful thing, really. And yet at the same time, it's a really scary thing. Libras are not good decision makers. I'm not saying that Libras can't make a decision. I've known a lot of Libras that have made decisions. It's not about whether you can or can't make the decision. I just think that Libras a lot of times are afraid to make the wrong decision. And that's why they're known as being indecisive. So when you don't have an influence over what you need to do, or something to kind of put you in one direction or another, it is a little bit uncomfortable, I will say. But I'm looking at this in a completely different way, actually. With nothing specific to influence you, it allows you free reign to focus on whatever long-term goals are the most important for you. And that is really important. How often do you get to sit down and just say, it's all about me? Let me sit down and make a decision that is all about me right now. If you're a Libra parent or a Libra spouse, or you are a Libra that is um, responsible for another person, that gets even more difficult. In fact, I know a Libra lady who's wonderful and she's awesome, and all of her children have grown up, and some of her grandchildren have grown up. She is still taking care of her kids, her grandkids. I have a feeling this woman will be sacrificing herself to take care of her great grandkids at this particular point. There comes a time when it is absolutely necessary to take a step back and go, what do I want to do? I mean, mind blown here. Okay. I would probably fall over and faint if this woman came up to me and said, wait, what do I want to do? Because I just am not expecting it. Of course, I would be super happy for her. She did that and would absolutely support her 100%. But I just don't see her doing that. In all the years that I've known her, she hasn't. I'd be very surprised if she did. But it is important taking the time to step out of what everybody else expects of you, what everybody else wants of you, to look at your long-term goals and decide what you want to do is extremely important, and without influence of your family, of your loved ones, of your friends, even the people you work with. Okay, everybody's got their own ulterior motive in this, and it's really important that this is a decision that you make for you. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're going to move on to Scorpio, where all the action is this week. Not all the action, but most of the action. Because, of course, we've got the Sun, Venus, and Mercury all moved into Scorpio recently. And I'm looking at it, actually, they moved in last week. So yeah, lots of stuff going on in there. Unfortunately, moving into opposition with Uranus at the end of the week, and then into a square with Saturn by the end of the week, which makes this a T-square, a much bigger challenge. Focus is on career. The Sun is where you shine. Venus is where you tend to be creative. Mercury is where communication is really, really necessary. And in opposition of Uranus in Taurus, Taurus is very much focused on the home. This does sort of put you in a position where you may find yourself either being offered a promotion or offered something in your business that is unfortunately going to take some time away from those that you love, those people that are associated with the home. This is a very common problem, actually, for a lot of women. I hate to keep bringing women up, and men are just as important, and this happens to them too. I'm not discounting them at all. But women, we have a lot of jobs. Okay, we wear a lot of hats. We are the housewife. We're responsible for the running of the house. We're responsible for taking care of the children. We're responsible in many cases for taking care of our husbands. When you have something come up that's going to take more time away from that, chances are the entire family is going to be against it, because how are they going to function without you? And my kids are totally grown, and it still seems to be a little bit of a challenge for the family when I'm gone for half the week at the time, and I still have a lot of guilt over that. Scorpio or no Scorpio, which I am not a Scorpio. So I feel like the challenge really is all about not so much that you can't take these business opportunities or these career opportunities, more about the guilt over those types of opportunities. When we bring Saturn into this challenge, and Saturn is very much on the cusp of the past and self. And of course, we're talking about self-care here a little bit, but we're also looking at the past for inspiration. Now, when we look at the past for inspiration, we find instances where we didn't take this job because it would take away from the people in our homes. And granted, we're not talking about somebody that you have to take care of in terms of you cannot leave them for a second because they can't take care of themselves. That's not what we're talking about here. That's a completely different instance there. We're talking about people that are used to you being there, and now they have to get used to doing things themselves a little bit more than they did before. That is always a difficult transition. And in the past, you'll probably find multiple different instances of where you decided that it was less of an argument if you just did what you needed to do to take care of these people and maybe didn't take those opportunities. This is going to come up again, and you're going to have to reevaluate again whether or not it's important for you to take this opportunity to make a little bit more money, or whether or not people around you are going to influence that decision for their own benefit. And that's really what's important here. When the moon joins this whole fiasco about the beginning of the week, actually, it's right on Monday, the moon moves into conjunction with Saturn in Aquarius, makes this a very emotional decision. And you may feel that it becomes so emotional that you just can't handle it. So what's the point? Let me just go ahead and make the easy decision. But that's not what you want to do. You definitely don't want your feelings making this decision for you. This is a decision that needs to be made with logic. It needs to be made. You need to look into what's best for you and your family. Don't put your needs on the back burner for other people. This has to be a decision that is good for everybody. So it's a little bit of a big deal, but it's nothing that you guys can't handle. So that is what I have for you guys this week. And we're moving on to Sagittarius. Focus is on that inner closet. Continues to be on that inner closet this week. No planets influencing Sagittarius. Not a bad thing. When they do move in a few weeks, there's going to be a little bit of a challenge there. So we'll just go ahead and enjoy not having a challenge while we have it, right? Focus is on that inner closet, and that feels like it's been going on forever for you guys, I'm sure, especially when we're talking about the emotional closet, the things that we kind of sort of just put away in the closet. We don't really deal with it. If you look at this as a physical closet, we all have that closet that's just got a bunch of junk that we can't get rid of in it. We're not really using it. It's just sort of sitting in there. But we can't bring ourselves to get rid of it. And I feel like our emotional closets are very much the same. Sagittarians in particular are very good at stuffing it down and pretending like nothing is happening. And then all of a sudden, someday this outburst comes out and you get really angry for almost no reason, if that makes sense. It just takes that little tiny thing to just set you off, right? And usually that happens because you focus not enough time on dealing with these things and just kind of sort of stuffing them away. Eventually, they're going to come out. My very intelligent and smartest person on the planet, as far as I'm concerned, mentor, who is a Sagittarius, always said this: you have a glass, you put water in it, you keep pouring water in it, eventually that water is going to come out, because the cup can only hold so much water. That is exactly how it is with our emotions. When we stuff them down, you can only stuff so much in there before it just breaks. And all of a sudden, you've got all of this crap coming out and you don't really know what to do with it. And the worst part is that it usually happens at a very inopportune time, not a time where it's convenient, like you're by yourself and you have nothing to do. I mean, let's face it, when are we ever in a situation these days, right? Not when you're by yourself and you have nothing to do, but when you are in the middle of something really important and you need to focus, and it's just every little thing is coming up, triggering all of these old roots that, if you had dealt with them before, wouldn't be as big of a deal. This week, I feel that triggers always come up when focus is on this, for sure. But I feel like it's less about the trigger and more about the root. And so, busy week or not, it's really important when you have something like that happen. It's really important to take the time, when you do have the time, to understand why that root is still there. Let me give you an example. Most everybody on the planet has an abandonment issue, something that happened when they were kids. It could be because as big as parents weren't there when they were children. It can be as small as mom forgot me and didn't pick me up from school one day because she was, something was going on or what have you, right? We've all kind of been there. The truth of the matter is that it doesn't matter what the issue is, it triggers this "I'm not important enough for you to be there" kind of a thing. So when you have instances come up now where somebody swears that they were going to be there to help you with something and they no-show you, it triggers that abandonment root. And when you have that abandonment root triggered, a lot of anger, a lot of old feelings come up around that. So it's really important actually to take the time to focus on that root, to really pay attention to, was I really abandoned? Am I looking at this from a child's perception instead of an adult's perception? By doing this, you may just eliminate that root, or at least make it so that it's not quite as strong and it's not ruling your reactions now. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're going to move on to Capricorn. It is all about you this week, Capricorns. We still continue to have Pluto in Capricorn, no longer in a grand sextile, which it has been for a really long time, but it is still in a sextile with Jupiter and Neptune, which is actually a very helpful aspect. With focus on self, in terms of Capricorn's focus is on self and self-care, self-awareness, self-growth, if you will. Jupiter and Neptune very much focused on actually two things. Jupiter's focused on is, even though they're in conjunction with each other, Jupiter's focus is on how you think. Neptune's focus is on the past. And so this is actually a very wonderful opportunity to look back to the past to see where maybe you needed a little bit of growth, but weren't providing that growth for yourself, if that makes sense. Let me elaborate here for just a minute. Pluto is your source of personal power. You guys have had Pluto in Capricorn forever. Next year, Pluto will finally move out of Capricorn, but not fully. It'll sort of go back and forth between Capricorn and Aquarius for a good couple of years, but that influence won't be there every single day for 25 years like it has been recently. In fact, I've never done horoscopes without Pluto being in Capricorn. So, and I've been doing it for 10 years. When we're looking at self-care and growth, personal growth, you want to look to the past for a couple of different reasons. One, where you tended to put other people's needs over your own needs. That's a very Capricorn thing to do, by the way. The other thing is how you think about growth is really important. Interestingly enough, there's been so many things going on recently. I've heard a lot more people talk about going to therapy than I ever have before. Even some people I've known for years that have looked down on therapy are actually choosing to go to therapy because there's just been so much that they can't seem to get out of it. I feel like this is a very Capricorn thing also, because Capricorns are, they tend to be people who just seem to have all their shit together. And for the most part, they're really good at looking like they have all their shit together, but they don't necessarily have all their shit together. Not as much as at least they are showing people they do, if that makes sense. So it's important actually to really look at where growth is important for you in a very honest way. And this is what's really important. I don't think that as human beings, we really look at ourselves as honestly as we should look at ourselves. With that being said, by looking at your growth in a very honest way and by looking at how you think about things. Every Capricorn I've ever known has had a little bit of pessimism. I mean, they're known for being pessimistic. In a line with my Capricorn grandmother, she says, "Oh, we're going to be in this line forever." We were actually in it for 5 minutes. Did she notice that she was wrong about her pessimistic outlook? No, she just looked at something else in a pessimistic way again. That is what Capricorns do. And by looking at how you think about things, are you pessimistic or optimistic? It actually helps you to be able to determine whether or not your own thought process is working against you. And that is information that you really need to have. So that's what I have for you guys this week. We're going to go ahead and move on to Aquarius. Of course, we still have Saturn in Aquarius. Saturn is direct now. And by Monday, the moon will be full on. Actually, we're going to kick off the week with the moon in Aquarius this week, moving into conjunction with that Saturn. And unfortunately, playing her part in a T-square, which is going on right now between Saturn, Uranus, which is in Taurus, and the Sun, Venus, and Mercury, which are all in Scorpio right now. So all these planets in fixed signs. That's about 5 of them, 5 out of 9. That's almost all of them, really. Does create kind of a big challenge. Focus is on the past, although Saturn brings a bit of a focus on self into this as well. And with Saturn being squared with all of these planets, Uranus, the Sun, Venus, and Mercury, it kind of puts you in a very interesting and maybe even a little bit of a difficult position as you look at the responsibilities to yourself, to your career, to your home, basically to everything that you're doing in your whole life right now. It's a bit much, right? And it does feel overwhelming. I can't tell you how many times I felt overwhelmed by all of my responsibilities, be they to my career, be they to my family, my home. I can say that I am not taking on responsibility for everything like maybe I should be. And then at the same time, I sort of look at that as, is it all just my responsibility? I mean, my career is, yes, I work for myself. So that is 100% my responsibility. But the home, I have a bunch of grown children. That is not 100% my responsibility. But the mother in me and society says it absolutely is. Think about it. If somebody walked into my house right now and looked at it the way it looks right now, which is not as beautiful as I would like it to, I would be the one that they would be looking at, not anybody else. I would be the one because I am the head female in the house. That is absolutely my responsibility. It stinks, but it is the way that it is. And I can waste all kinds of money fighting against it. I'm not going to waste that energy. I said money. I'm not wasting money on it. I'm wasting energy on it. So we're really in sort of, kind of, it feels like a little bit overwhelming. Look to the past for inspiration in this, because of course Saturn and the moon are focused on the past as well as self. And if you got all that stuff on your plate, self-care is like, where's the time for that, right? It doesn't take much. Trust me, it doesn't take much. It takes you utilizing your time in the right way. I am very guilty about using phrases like, I'm just so busy, I don't have any time. The truth is that I have piles of time. I just don't always use it as wisely as I could be using it. So when you look at it that way, it does change things a little bit. The moon's influence for those couple of days, though, we're looking at Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, do make things a little bit challenging because we add an emotional layer to the whole entire mess. Like, we really need to add an emotional layer to the whole entire mess. And we're talking about Aquarians here who tend to avoid any kind of emotional anything as much as possible. But unfortunately, we can't avoid it completely. It is something that is part of our human makeup. So trying to run away from it isn't really going to work out very well for you. Trust me, you just can't run far enough away. Eventually, it does catch up with you. And I'm kind of an emotional stuffer, so I do know what I'm talking about. The issue here is that the moon is not just, I'm sad about this. The moon is responsible for emotions. That means every single one of them. That means losing your temper when things are not running smoothly when you'd like them to be. That means spending some time beating yourself up because things are not running as smoothly as you would like to. And the truth of the matter is that you don't want to avoid that emotion. You want to understand where that comes from. Your feelings are there for a reason. The more you run away from them, the less you're learning about yourself. And that was one of the most important lessons I think I've ever had to learn in my entire life, really. So pay attention to those feelings. Why do you feel the way that you feel? Is it somebody else's responsibility or is it yours? Quite frankly, sometimes we're just putting too much responsibility on ourselves when we don't need to. And it's not that other people are doing it. It's just easier to blame other people sometimes. So that's what I have for you guys this week. You can balance your life between your home and your career as easily or as difficultly as you possibly can. It just takes you to sit down and decide which one is going to be better for you. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And finally, we're moving on to Pisces. We have Neptune in Pisces. We also have Jupiter in Pisces. Both planets continue to be retrograde this week and will continue to be retrograde throughout the week. We also have the moon moving into Pisces. And when the moon moves into conjunction with those two planets, we have some good things and some bad things. Honestly, nothing too major, though. We're not going to go too crazy here because we don't want to go too terribly crazy. Let's start with the good before we get to the challenges here, as of course all three planets are in a sextile with Pluto, as well as a trine with Mercury, which is focused on career. Now, Pisces is very much focused on the past. And the element of that moon makes that really tricky because a lot of times when we focus on the past, we're looking at the good old days when things were easier and not so complicated. A lot of us look back to our childhoods when we didn't have any responsibility. Somebody else was taking care of all that responsibility for us. We just had to go to school and have fun. That was our whole thing. Um, but the other reason why looking at the past is tricky is because we're not always looking at it in as honest a view as we would like to. For instance, the reality of certain relationships may have been more toxic than we are realizing or looking at it now. Sometimes we tend to look at things the way we want to see them and not necessarily the way that they were, which can be a bit of a challenge. This sextile with Pluto actually helps you to look at your successes, your past successes, to be able to you can feel powerful about the decisions that you're making right now, which is really important. And this trine with Mercury, Mercury is very much focused on your career. So it's also helping you to be able to see that those past successes can also help you be successful now in your career as well. We do have all three of these planets moving into a square with Mars, which is retrograde, and Mars focus is on your day-to-day schedule. Now, two things come out of a Mars retrograde. One, Mars is all about ambition, and it kind of cools that ambition down a little bit, almost makes it feel like you have no ambition, which is a bit scary, actually. The other thing is that Mars is also a very aggressive planet, and it cools that aggression down a little bit too. Most of the time, we look at that as a good thing. We don't want too much aggression going on in the world. I think we already have enough. At the same time, though, it's bad if it is a problem and this retrograde Mars is keeping you from standing up for yourself in a particular situation that you need to stand up for yourself in. So that's where it becomes a little bit of a challenge there. With Mars focused on your day-to-day schedule and all of these planets focused on the past, and in some cases how you think, it's really important, actually, especially with all of these planets being retrograde. It's really important to sit down and evaluate how your own mindset may be getting in the way of your plans, and that might be killing your ambition faster than anything else. I know a particular Pisces who started to go to school when he turned 40 to completely change his entire life. Now, I'm not saying that he's not going back to school, but it does get, after a while, a little bit more difficult to keep up that pace. You get, of course, it takes years, and then you start to feel like by the time you get there, you're going to be too old. Your mind is working against you. The more you think about all of these possibilities, the less likely you are to be successful. And success is really what it's all about. So that's what I have for you guys this week. It's a little bit tricky, but it's nothing that you guys can't navigate through and handle and be able to find some success for yourselves. So that's what I have for everybody this week. Thanks for hanging out. Hey, if you haven't heard, the 13 card reading for 2023 is live. It's available, and it will continue to be available throughout the end of the year. And if you want to get on that list, you should probably hurry up and get on that list. You can order it on my website, heavymetalpsychic.com. You can also get in touch with me by emailing heavymetalpsychic@gmail.com, and you can order the reading that way. I'm Melissa Bruce, the Heavy Metal Psychic. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next week. Make it a great week, everybody.